You tap a thermostat, and cold stops being a problem you ever have to think about. For over 300,000 years, every single ancestor you have survived brutal winters without one. And their fingers did something stranger than just going numb, flushing hot, then freezing, then flushing hot again, cycling on and off through the coldest nights of their lives. That's not the slow shutdown most people picture. The popular image of early humans in the Ice Age is a huddled, shivering figure slowly losing a fight against the weather. The real story is closer to engineering than tragedy. A body running a survival program most people never notice happening inside their own skin today. Start with the misconception, because it's almost everywhere. Documentaries love to show early humans as barely hanging on, one bad night from freezing to death. But your ancestors didn't just endure the cold. Their bodies actively managed it, second by second, using systems so precise that modern physiologists are still mapping exactly how they work. So what actually happens the moment cold air hits bare skin? The first response is fast and almost invisible. Blood vessels near the surface of your skin tighten, a process called vasoconstriction, which simply means the vessels squeeze themselves narrower, so less warm blood flows near the cold surface where heat could escape. Your body is choosing what to save. Blood gets pulled inward, toward the chest, the heart, the lungs, the organs that cannot afford to cool down even a little. Your hands and feet, meanwhile, are treated as expendable outposts. Cold, aching fingers were never a malfunction. They were a decision your circulatory system made on purpose. But here's the part almost nobody expects. If exposure drags on, something strange interrupts that pattern. The blood vessels in the fingers suddenly widen again, flooding them with warm blood, even though the air around them is still freezing. Skin that was pale and numb turns pink and prickling, sometimes even painful, as feeling rushes back in. Then minutes later, it clamps shut again. Cold, then warm, then cold, over and over, all through a long winter night. This cycling has a name, the hunting reaction, first documented by the British physiologist Sir Thomas Lewis in 1930. He noticed that fingers exposed to intense cold didn't just shut down and stay shut. They oscillated, hunting between protecting the core and protecting the tissue itself from frostbite. It's a compromise your body negotiates with itself in real time. Shut the hands down too long, and the core stays warm, but the fingers die. Keep them open, and the fingers survive, but the core bleeds away heat it can't spare. So the body splits the difference again and again, thousands of times over a single freezing night. Why would evolution build something discomplicated instead of one simple switch? Because a hunter with dead fingers can't grip a spear, and a hunter with a cold heart doesn't wake up at all. Both had to survive. That reaction alone should reframe how you picture the Ice Age. But surviving one cold night was only the first problem. The body still had to solve a second one that most people never even ask about. What happens when winter doesn't end after one night, but lasts for months? This is where a second system takes over, one that doesn't rely on shivering at all. Your body carries a special kind of fat called brown fat, so named because it's packed with tiny energy-producing structures that give it a darker color than ordinary fat. Instead of just storing energy, brown fat burns it directly to generate heat, a process researchers call non-shivering thermogenesis, heat production without the muscle shaking you'd expect. Modern scans have shown adults still carry active brown fat today, more of it in people regularly exposed to cold. Your ancestors, living outdoors through Ice Age winters, likely relied on it constantly, quietly warming themselves from the inside without ever consciously trying.
And their bodies weren't working alone. Genetic research, led by paleogeneticist Svante Pääbo, has shown that some populations carry gene variants inherited from Neanderthals, ancient cousins of modern humans who lived through some of the harshest glacial conditions in Europe, variants linked to fat metabolism and cold response. In other words, some of the cold survival toolkit in your own cells may be a direct hand-down from an entirely different human species. That's not folklore, that's published genetics. Biology only tells half the story, though. The other half is behavior, and this is where the evidence gets almost unbearably human. In 1991, hikers in the Ötztal Alps discovered a naturally mummified body, later named Ötzi, frozen for over 5,000 years. He wasn't caught unprepared. He carried a copper axe, a fire-starting kit with fungus that smolders slowly like a portable ember, and clothing built from at least 4 different animal materials layered for warmth. His body was a biological furnace. His gear was the engineering layer stacked on top of it. Cold survival was never biology versus culture. It was always both, working together. That partnership goes back much further than Ötzi. At Sunghir, a roughly 34,000-year-old site in Russia, excavated starting in the 1950s under archaeologist Otto Botter, researchers found Ice Age burials containing thousands of painstakingly carved mammoth ivory beads sewn once onto clothing that has long since rotted away. Think about that for a moment. In the middle of a glacial world where every calorie and every hour mattered for survival, someone still spent countless hours carving beads by firelight. Cold wasn't just something the body fought, it was something communities gathered around, told stories through, and decorated their way of living inside of. Warmth wasn't only physiological, it was social. Bodies pressed close around a fire, voices low, the night held back together rather than alone. So how does any of this connect to you, sitting somewhere warm right now? More directly than you'd think. That hunting reaction Sir Thomas Lewis documented almost a century ago is the same mechanism behind the modern practice of deliberate cold exposure, ice baths, cold showers, breathing techniques popularized by figures like Wim Hof, all of it leaning on a cycling blood vessel response your ancestors relied on every single winter without ever naming it. The difference is that for them, it wasn't an optional training, it was Tuesday. Every layer of clothing you own, every insulated jacket is a modern echo of Ötzi's fungus-lined fire kit, technology standing in for a job your own body used to do almost entirely on its own. None of this means the cold was gentle. People did die from it, the record is clear on that, and it varied enormously depending on age, health, and how prepared a group was for a given winter. There was no universal human cold tolerance. Adaptation differed by population, by generation, by circumstance. But dying from cold and merely enduring it are two very different stories. And the more physiologists learn, the more the second story looks less like suffering and more like precision. Vessels narrowing and widening on a rhythm, fat tissue burning quietly for warmth no one had to think about, genes passed down from an entirely different kind of human, fire kits engineered from fungus and copper, beads carved by hand in the middle of a glacial night. You tap a thermostat and forget cold ever existed as a problem at all. Your ancestors never had that luxury, and yet their bodies had already solved it, one careful cycling heartbeat at a time, long before anyone ever thought to build a switch on a wall.